Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This time, we're going deep on gold and the thinking of one of the most successful investors out there, Thomas Kaplan.
Yeah. Kaplan, he's a fascinating guy, right? Not your typical finance, tycoon, let's say. He actually started out as a historian at Oxford, no less.
Like, you wouldn't think history and markets go together, but Kaplan's kind of proof they do. I'm curious how that background shaped his investing.
So his history expertise really plays a key role, especially his understanding of cycles, patterns. Where others see chaos, he sees opportunity.
Can you give an example? Like, how does that work in practice?
Take his success with silver back in the 90s.
Okay.
Everyone thought silver was dead, right? Digital photography was taking over.
Right. Made sense at the time.
Exactly. But Kaplan, he saw it differently. He realized the analysis saying silver was doomed, it was flawed. They didn't account for things like recycling. There was actually a structural deficit in silver. Kaplan saw this, went all in.
I'm guessing it paid off.
Oh, big time. He even convinced the legendary investor George Soros to invest in silver. They both made a fortune. This story really shows Kaplan is a true contrarian. He goes against the grain, questions conventional wisdom.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But his road to success wasn't always smooth, was it? I mean, I read he made some risky investments in places like Bolivia, Zimbabwe, even Afghanistan.
Right, yeah. So initially, Kaplan, he was all about finding the best opportunities regardless of location. Go where the gold is was his motto. He'd go wherever the resources were.
That strategy has to come with some serious risk, though, right?
Yeah.
Especially in those politically unstable places.
That's exactly what Kaplan realized. He saw firsthand how quickly things could change, how political instability could threaten even the most promising projects. I mean, the risk of a government nationalizing a mine or suddenly changing the rules, that's always there, especially in those countries with weak institutions.
So that's what they call jurisdictional risk then, right?
That's it, exactly. And Kaplan has actually said that's the biggest threat to mining today. It's why he's changed his strategy completely.
Oh, he's not investing in those countries anymore.
Yeah, he did a total realignment. Now he's focused almost entirely on North America and Australia. He believes those countries offer a much more stable and safer environment for his investments.
That sounds like a pretty smart move. But isn't it also kind of an admission that the world's getting riskier?
It is. Kaplan is very concerned about what he sees as a trend toward resource nationalization. More and more countries wanting to control their raw materials and keep out foreign investors.
That's kind of a scary trend. What does all this mean for the future of gold, though?
Kaplan's argument is that the challenges the gold industry is facing right now are actually, paradoxically, a bullish sign for gold prices.
Okay.
So less exploration, declining grades in existing mines, and the long lead time it takes to bring new mines online, that all points to a supply crunch in the future.
So it's almost a classic supply and demand situation.
Exactly. When you have supply falling and demand staying steady or even rising, prices go up. Kaplan is convinced this dynamic will push gold prices significantly higher in the coming years.
Doesn't the gold price also depend a lot on, fear of crises and inflation, though?
It does. But Kaplan isn't just relying on those fear factors to justify his bullishness on gold. He believes the fundamentals alone, the pure supply and demand dynamics, are enough to drive gold to a new equilibrium. He's predicting a new equilibrium price between, get this, $3,000 and $5,000 an ounce.
Wow, that's a huge increase from where it is today. What projects is Kaplan actually backing now?
Okay, so his crown jewel, the one he's really betting on, is the Donlin Gold Project. It's in Alaska. It has the potential to be maybe the largest pure gold mine in the world.
Alaska. Sounds like something out of a Jack London novel.
It's not a coincidence he chose that project, though. Alaska is considered to be one of the safest jurisdictions in the world as far as political risk goes.
So Kaplan's learned from his experience is now all about safety and stability.
Definitely. Donlin is the perfect example of his new philosophy. Top-tier assets in safe locations.
And how can investors get in on this project?
Okay, so his publicly traded company, NovaGold, owns 50% of Donlin. It's a classic pure play, meaning NovaGold's success is directly tied to Donlin's success. If Kaplan's right about gold, and Donlin lives up to expectations, NovaGold stock could really take off.
That sounds interesting. But before we go too deep on NovaGold, maybe we should dive a little further into Kaplan's thinking, his investment philosophy.
Yeah, sure. What are you most curious about?
I'm kind of curious how he explains the fact that gold hasn't performed as well as many experts expected in recent years.
That's a great question. We'll dig into that right after this.
So I'm curious how Thomas Kaplan explains this apparent contradiction that, gold hasn't performed as well as many expected, given all the crises and inflation we've seen.
Well, Kaplan argues that gold often behaves differently than you'd expect. He actually compares the gold market to a volcano. For a long time, things are bubbling beneath the surface. Nothing seems to be happening. But then, boom, you get an eruption.
That's a vivid image. But what does that mean in practice? When's he expecting this eruption in the gold price?
He actually believes that this current phase, this skepticism, even frustration, it's a precursor to a massive move. Like, he points to historical patterns. Big price jumps in gold are often preceded by periods of doubt, of uncertainty.
So it's almost like when everyone's doubting, that's the time to buy.
In a simplified way, yeah. Kaplan emphasizes the need for patience, a long-term perspective. He's
Yeah.
not a trader, flipping things quickly. He's an investor. He buys assets he believes in and holds them for years, sometimes decades.
Sounds like a very disciplined, contrarian approach.
Yeah.
But how does that square with his earlier strategy of investing in these risky regions?
Well, Kaplan's strategy has evolved, become more refined. Those early investments like Bolivia, Zimbabwe, they were successful. But he learned some hard lessons. Political instability, corruption can derail even the best projects.
Which led him to focus on North America and Australia.
Right. He realized that you can't just focus on the quality of the assets. You need to consider the stability and safety of the environment you're investing in.
Makes sense. But aren't there political risks to mining even in developed countries like the U.S. or Canada?
Sure, there are political risks everywhere, but they're generally much lower in developed countries. Kaplan emphasizes the rule of law, the protection of property rights. Those things are much stronger in places like the U.S. or Canada.
That's true. What about cryptocurrencies? Does Kaplan believe, Bitcoin could replace gold as a safe haven?
It's interesting. He's never really engaged with Bitcoin much. He said he always felt it was, irrelevant in the long run. He does acknowledge, though, that the crypto boom did help popularize this idea of, a decentralized currency outside of government control.
Kind of an unintentional assist for gold.
You could say that. Kaplan believes the growing skepticism toward the traditional financial system, the search for alternatives, that will ultimately benefit gold.
What about the role of central banks? Aren't they buying gold too? A lot of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Kaplan points out that central banks, especially in emerging markets, they've been buying record amounts of gold, diversifying their reserves away from the U.S. dollar, other fiat currencies.
That's a pretty strong sign of distrust in the current system.
It is. And Kaplan sees this as another sign that the global financial system is undergoing a major shift, and that gold will play an increasingly important role as a safe haven.
It's all very compelling. But how did Kaplan actually implement his strategy? How did he even get involved with NovaGold in the first place?
So Kaplan, initially, he wanted to take over NovaGold completely, but then he decided on a smaller stake.
Why was that? Wasn't it attractive enough?
No, quite the opposite. During the due diligence, the process of vetting the company before buying it, they realized that the Donlin gold deposit was actually much bigger than initially thought. His chief geologist, Larry Buchanan, he discovered that the deposit might actually contain twice as much gold as they'd estimated.
That sounds like quite a lucky break.
Oh, yeah. And it also shows that Kaplan has a knack for finding these, hidden gems.
But NovaGold was a penny stock for years. How did Kaplan manage to fund the company and move the Donlin project forward?
That's a remarkable story. So in 2012, Kaplan and NovaGold's CEO, Greg Lang, they pulled off an incredible deal. They managed to raise a significant amount of capital despite a lot of skepticism. It was a real feat.
So that was the start of a very successful partnership then.
Yeah, definitely. You had Kaplan with his reputation as a successful investor, and Greg Lang, he brought decades of experience in the gold mining industry.
Perfect combination.
Yeah.
What convinced the investors to put money in, though?
They really sold them on the vision. Donlin becoming one of the largest, most efficient gold mines in the world.
This is what Kaplan calls a category killer, right?
Exactly. He looks for companies and projects that have the potential to, dominate their markets. And Donlin really fits that mold. It's this massive, high-grade gold deposit in a safe jurisdiction.
Sounds like a very promising project. But before we get too deep on Donlin and NovaGold, maybe let's just recap what we've learned about Thomas Kaplan and his philosophy.
Yeah, that's a good idea. What do you think are the key takeaways? So Kaplan's philosophy, he's all about, finding those companies that have a clear competitive advantage, operating in a growing market, and of course, with a strong management team.
That makes a lot of sense. But finding those companies, that can't be easy.
No, it definitely takes work. But Kaplan, he seems to have this knack for finding those category killer investments. He can spot trends early on, sees opportunities that, well, most people miss.
His success with Nova Gold and Donlin is a perfect example of that.
Exactly. Novagold, it's this small but really powerful company with huge potential. And Donlin, the project itself, checks all the boxes. It's big, it's high grade, and it's in a safe jurisdiction.
Those are the key ingredients for a category killer now.
Yeah, for sure.
Makes you wonder if there are other Donlins out there just waiting to be discovered.
Well, there's always something, right? The markets are constantly changing, new opportunities emerging.
True. But getting back to Kaplan's approach, he's not afraid of risk, right? He's made some pretty bold moves in the past.
He has, but he's strategic about it. He never puts all his eggs in one basket. He always diversifies, and he always has a plan B, just in case things don't work out as planned.
So a very disciplined approach. I'm curious, though, how does he keep emotions out of it? Because when it comes to risky investments, well, it's easy to get caught up in the hype or, panic when things go south.
Kaplan, he's really mastered self-control. He doesn't let greed or fear cloud his judgment. He sticks to the facts, the analysis, and he's always willing to change his mind if the facts change.
That's an impressive quality, especially in the world of investing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But what about the time factor? I mean, Kaplan often invests in these projects that might not pay off for years, even decades. How does he deal with that uncertainty?
Patience. That's his key. Kaplan, he's not looking for a quick buck. He thinks in decades, not years. He believes that over time, patience and, persistence will pay off. And, his experience shows that the best investments are often the ones you hold the longest.
It's a good reminder for all of us, I think. Don't get caught up in the short term, Think long term. But does that mean we should all be piling into gold mining stocks right now?
Oh, there, not so fast. Any investment decision, it needs to be carefully considered, aligned with your own risk tolerance. Gold mining stocks, they can be volatile. They're not for everyone.
Right, good point. So what are some other ways to invest in gold then, if you're interested?
There are several options. You can buy physical gold, you can invest in gold funds, or you can look at gold ETFs. Each approach has its pros and cons.
What should people consider when choosing between those options?
Well, first, the costs. Physical gold can be expensive to buy up front. You have to deal with storage, insurance. Gold funds and ETFs, they tend to be more cost-effective.
What about taxes? Do those come into play?
Yeah, definitely. You got to factor in taxes. So here's the thing. Profits from selling physical gold, they're generally tax-free after a holding period of 1 year. But with gold funds and ETFs, well, you're usually subject to capital gains taxes.
Good point. Taxes are definitely something to keep in mind. But circling back to Thomas Kaplan, what can we learn from him, even if we're not, billionaires with a passion for gold mines?
He shows us that with a clear vision, discipline, and patience, you can achieve success in the markets. He's really a role model for how to build wealth over the long term, Thinking strategically, managing risk. Those are valuable lessons for all investors, big or small.
It's an inspiring message. Thanks so much for joining us today. This was a fascinating conversation. Really learned a lot about Thomas Kaplan and his approach to investing.
It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
And for everyone listening, if you're interested in hearing more deep dives into the world of finance, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We're constantly exploring new ideas, new strategies, all to help you make better investment decisions.
Until next time.